All right, Rebels. Today we're diving into a part of the creator economy that almost nobody talks about until it's too late: the law. And to guide us through the legal minefield creators face every single day, I brought on Matthew Fornaro, a South Florida business law attorney who's been serving creators, entrepreneurs, and small businesses since 2003. This episode cuts through the noise. This isn't theory, this is hard won experience from someone who has fought in the trenches of commercial litigation, contract disputes, IP cases, and the rise of AI driven legal challenges. If you're a creator, a podcaster, a small business owner, or someone building a brand that you want to protect, this episode may save you thousands of dollars and years of stress. So strap in, everyone, because it's time to get legally dangerous. Today, we're talking with Matthew Fornaro, a South Florida business law attorney serving creators, entrepreneurs, and small businesses since 2003. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, John. I'm glad to be here.
So, what originally made you want to become a lawyer?
So it's interesting. Growing up, I was always into legal shows, but not like Law and Order, LA Law type stuff. I'm talking like the People's Court and stuff like that. It was more like granular. So I always was into that. I always knew I kind of wanted to be an attorney. And, went to undergrad. I was a political science major, which unless you're in Washington, D.C., you're not doing much with. So I went to law school and I became an attorney.
Very cool. What drew you specifically to helping businesses and creators?
Sure. So initially, when I graduated, I worked for a commercial litigation firm, and then I worked for two large AmLaw 200 law firms. And I wasn't really helping small or medium-sized businesses or entrepreneurs or creators. I was working for my clients were like multinational corporations and banks and, credit card companies and stuff like that. So I kind of, did law stuff and whatever there. And then I had the opportunity about 10 years ago to either work for one of the 10 largest law firms in the world or go start my own law firm. So I thought about it long and hard, and I was like, am I just going to be in the same cycle a few years from now and be like, oh, I've plateaued at this place. What am I going to do? Whatever. So I decided I was going to go start my own law firm. So what I wanted to do was focus on helping small, medium-sized businesses, startups, entrepreneurs, creators, because I thought they were underserved by, all large law firms and a lot of other law firms. And then also, I grew up where my dad owned a business for most of my life growing up. So I saw, I don't want to say the struggles, but I'll say like the issues that he faced as a small business owner. And I remember various things that he had to do and whatever. And I thought it would be nice to help people like in my dad's position with proper legal counsel, legal representation, where normally, if they were to go do that and go to a large firm, it would cost an astronomical amount of money. Or if they go to like a general practitioner or whatever, they're just, take whatever walks in. They're not really attuned to small, medium-sized startup business issues where they're just like, okay, I'll help you out because, you have a heartbeat and you have money and you're going to pay me. So that's kind of all that brought it together, and that's how I wound up where I am today.
Oh, very cool. The thing is, it's like the creator space itself has a lot of different challenges when it comes to legal issues. And as somebody from just starting out, like we are here, Podcasters Business Insider, it's the biggest thing that we have, and we'll get into this in a little bit, is copyright laws. But we'll
Hmm.
get into that in a little bit because that's the one biggest scare that we have is not to infringe on any copyright laws because some of the money that we can get sued for is it won't just bury us or destroy us. It will literally put a nail in the coffin of our entire lives
Hmm.
and just bury us for the rest of it.
Yes.
It's we can get into that a little bit later, but before we do, because that's probably the biggest scare that we have as startup creators. It's those copyright laws and the big
Mm.
boys that can pay those big bucks can really destroy our lives. Um, in your point of view, what's the biggest shift since 2003 that you've seen the creator space and the small business landscape when it comes to uh, your practice?
I would say the integration of technology into business, doing things that people used to do and services that people used to perform, and then increasingly, like in the last 3+ years, probably the integration of AI into business, no matter what kind of business it is, because AI can, uh, essentially revolutionize many businesses, and I've seen it happen with a lot of my clients that I deal with, and I've seen it happen in my own practice. So I would say probably technological innovations would be the biggest thing I've seen in the last 20 years.
Staying with the AI thing, are there any like serious legal issues that content creators can face when it comes to utilizing AI?
Yes, because it's the same thing you face when you have content or whatever without AI is if you manipulate video or do something or something that has someone that already has a copyright on the source material, then you're going to have problems. So a lot of the AI stuff is you got to be careful of derivative works that you're making where you're taking someone else's copyrighted material, running it through AI to do whatever. And then the thing that comes out is, yeah, it's new, but it's based on something that's already copyrighted. But at the same time, AI has a lot of, what you would call in the old days, like open source stuff, where it's not copyrighted, where you can generate whatever you want from the AI and it's non-copy or it's non-copyrighted. And then because the AI is not a human, it's a machine or data or whatever you want to call it. So it's not an author. So there's a lot of things that don't apply to it because you can't, the way that the law is set up, like, I'll talk about in the United States because I just read an opinion on this last week. You can't have a artificial intelligence be like the author of something and have the same rights as if you authored it. So that's something that the law has to deal with, that they're going to deal with and they need to deal with, that they're kind of going through right now. But that's an example of like what a content creator should be on the lookout for regarding AI is taking stuff and just kind of changing a little bit but not enough. It's the same thing as if you were to do it without using AI, just using regular technology or whatever. So that's probably one of the biggest AI hurdles that a creator would have to face. But
Because you kind of see that in the music industry. Like they'll take a riff and they'll expand on that riff from another song. Like I've seen it so many times with different cultures. Like in Bollywood, like their music, even in Greek music. Like they'll take an American song, they'll take a small riff from it or a small beat from it, and they'll change the language, they'll change a couple of things, and it's a completely new song, but the beat and the riffs are still the same as the original song.
yeah, I mean
Isn't
that's
that the same as like taking like something from I don't know, Joe Rogan show, just popping it into Chat GPT and say, I like this style, I like this music, I like this question, come up with something that's similar to that.
yeah, it's a fine line, and it's something that's obviously being explored as we speak right now, and there's no definite right or wrong answer or black and white response to it, because if you look at like a historical copyright issue of like music sampling, like you were talking about, so you know, music sampling has been around for a long time. I mean, it goes. I mean, one of the main copyright cases in the U.S. goes back to the '60s and the '70s with George Harrison and the song "My Sweet Lord," where he sampled it from like a Motown song and got in trouble for it. So that's been around for a while. Sampling things and using things and needing to change music around has it's been around for over 50 years. It's just changing now because now it's not just you took a riff or you took a note or you took a lyric or something. It's like now with AI and technology, you can take like you give me the feel of the song or give me the whatever of the song and duplicate it. So it's a fine line between that and it's a new product versus it's like a derivative product or whatever. I think though that it's much harder to prove that your song is like, I don't want to say a ripoff, but like a copy or something of an existing song because it makes you feel like it's the same song or whatever. That's like a harder non-objective standard to prove versus like it uses the same riff or it uses the same notes or whatever, where it's like something that I can objectively show you versus like a subjective feeling. So I think as we go on, you may see development regarding that, regarding, like trying to objectify things that really aren't objective regarding like, like the music thing or, other copyrighted material, especially because, like you said, AI can take something and change it or whatever and emulate it in a way that it's not a direct copy, but it's like a transliteration, which the law really isn't that attuned to or geared for at this point in time, no matter where it is.
How far away are we with that kind of stuff? With that kind of stuff where new content creators have to be careful about.
Well, I think, if you create stuff, and I use the term create as broadly as possible, and it's original, obviously that's never going to go away. If you make original content, you didn't copy someone or you didn't do whatever, you're fine and nothing should happen to you. If you're inspired now by other things and you use like AI to bridge that inspiration to your reality of making like a video or a song or, like a blog post or whatever, that's where you may run into issues. But, the legislation isn't there yet. The court opinions aren't there yet to catch up to situations that a content creator would face where, I want to take something that kind of exists and make something new, but it's not really based on something that exists. It's kind of inspired by. So that kind of fine line really hasn't been examined all that well yet. And so I guess the moral of the story for content creators now is if you always create stuff, you're always going to be, that's original, nothing, you're always going to be fine. If you're now getting inspiration or, source material from something and you're kind of changing it around or whatever, you could be fine. You may, it should be fine if it's really different from your source material, but, it's hard to say at this point because, we're not there yet. The law is not caught up to where content creators and society and technology are. So, I mean, the moral of the story is if it's original, you'll always be great. But if you're using source material, I mean, you have to make it substantially different enough from the source material that it's not considered, part of the source material itself.
Do you ever think that we're going to get to the point where AI, now this is coming from a sci-fi nerd, so forgive me. Do you think that we're ever going to get to the point where AI is going to get to the point where it's going to need its own litigation and protection from us mortal humans for the content that it is creating, that we would have to put like say labels saying this has been created by ChatGPT or this has been created by Grok?
Yeah, I think, AI rights or whatever you want to call them, like the rights to AI creations. I mean, right now there's, it's like the Wild West out there, because it's like if you go to like, you know, any of these AI engines that create like videos or music or whatever, there's, it's created by a machine or artificial intelligence, so there's no real ownership interest in it, and then there's no real right in the ownership interest, because it's not a human that made it, and the laws are protecting creators, and by creators they mean humans. So now you have to have, I mean, you're going to see laws change in legislation and case law, whatever, where, if you own the AI that made the stuff, then, you're probably going to want to have rights to it, versus, you created it and then it made something that made someone a lot of money and you don't have the rights to it because it was open sourced, or because it was not a derivative work or something completely new or whatever. So yeah, you're probably going to see that down the road, where companies, some of these AI companies that make, music, where, you can go to an AI generator and say, like, give me a song that sounds like, like the Beatles in the 1960s, like Britpop, whatever. And then it creates like a 1960s sounding Britpop thing or whatever. But, nobody has the rights to it because it was just created by AI and whatever. You're probably going to see something down in the future where the company that created it is probably going to somehow get rights to it. And it'll probably go from there, and it'll probably be very confusing, and there's probably not going to be like a fine bright line test, and it's going to be murky, and there's going to be a lot of different case law about it, because it's kind of a hard issue to prove or whatever. But that's probably what you're going to see in the future.
Yeah, because I can see how it gets murky with that, because it's like, okay, yes, ChatGPT or Grok or whatever AI generator created it, but the idea didn't come from that AI generator. It came from a person with the idea. So
Yeah.
I think that's more that falls into IP issues.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to fall into copyright issues and maybe trademark issues and licensing issues and things like that. But, just because you came up with the idea that came up with the idea that came up with the end product doesn't mean that you have the rights to the end product. So I think that that's something kind of like what I was saying, that the law isn't there yet, trying to figure out who owns the rights to that end product that was created by AI. Even though you input the data to make it, you still didn't make it yourself. An artificial intelligence entity made it. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit here. Let's talk a little bit more about what content creators, podcasters, YouTubers, YouTube Live people, what kind of services would they need? Because to be honest with you, the industry itself doesn't make a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of services could somebody in this content creation space would they need from a lawyer?
Sure. So it's funny you say that, because as we were sitting here in my inbox, I just got a copy of a release that I signed for a podcast that I did a few weeks ago, that they just sent me the finalized version. So that right there is an example of something where, like, a content creator or a podcaster or something needs to have written contracts in place for what they're creating. So for instance, that release, solidifies the relationship between the guest and the podcast host, that says who owns what, who has the rights to what, how you can reproduce it, how you can use it, how you can market it or do whatever. And if you don't have that in writing in a written contract, then you're going to have problems, because, I may take your podcast and, put it all over the dark web or something crazy, someplace that you don't want it. And because we didn't have a relationship between us that was reduced to writing that said who had the rights to what or whatever, then you're kind of out of luck. Versus if you have a contract, then well, your guest doesn't have the rights to it. You have the ultimate rights to it, or your guest only has the rights to put it on mainstream social media or something like that. So that's an example of something like how a content creator would need a contract in place to enforce their rights with their guests. You'd also want contracts in place regarding like whatever platform that you're posting your stuff on to make sure that, you have pricing guarantees, or you have guarantees of access, or promotion guarantees, or things like that. So there's a lot of content. There's a lot of, I would say, contract-based things that content creators need protection on, from not just the creation of the content, but to the execution and the distribution of the content. So, and then there's also, like you have the copyright to the broadcast. So someone can't use the broadcast, but that also goes towards your contract issues too. So there's a lot of things. Oh, and then, like issues regarding payment, if you get paid or whatever, obviously, enforcing payment provisions and things like that. Those are obvious, or you pay also to be hosted on certain things. So those are things that obviously you need to have contracts in place for, to make sure that there are, your rights are enforced and protected.
Because there's a lot of content creators out there, myself included, that we don't really give too much of a thought on this, because we are under the guise, I guess you can say, that we are more of a sharing space. Like, I will give my episode to you, and I will trust that you would put it into good use and not distort the message behind this conversation to be distorted in any way. There's a huge trust community that goes in being a podcaster and in the podcasting world.
No, it's true. I mean, you're making your podcast, you want it to be distributed and get as wide a viewership as possible and carry your message out there. So in order to do that, obviously you're going to trust your guest and whoever else you work with to further your mantra or whatever. But at the same time too, I could be a madman. You don't know what I'm going to do with this podcast once.
That's true.
Once it's done. So, as much as you want to trust, you still are in a business relationship, whether you're making money or not, with your guest or with your distributor or with your platform or whatever. So you always want to make sure that that business relationship is solidified with a contract where, it's not like an insult to have a guest sign like a terms of use thing or whatever, because it's just saying, I trust you. I've reduced it to writing. And as part of that trust, you can post your stuff on social media or on your website or whatever, but you can't misuse it or use it for like nefarious purposes or whatever. So I think, it doesn't really reflect poorly on your wanting to trust someone. It's just you protecting yourself and you protecting the content that you created, and for content creators protecting the content that they create. And, it's a necessary part of society, is that you need to have your rights and your relationships thoroughly documented in a contract or in terms of service or in a release or in something like that, because you just can't take someone's word for it, because you never know what can happen.
What about somebody taking a message out of context? Like, we've seen this in the past with so many other big names, the late Charlie Kirk, Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan. If you want to go on the other side, Barack Obama, they say bits and pieces, and the other side will just grab bits and just take it, pull it, and just destroy that person completely out of context of what that person just said. How could somebody like myself, who's just starting out into podcasting, protect myself so that doesn't happen?
Well, sound bites and, taking people out of context or whatever is as old as, the written word or even the spoken word. I mean, it's just now it's a lot easier where you can like digitally dissect sound bites and, do whatever loop or whatever it is you want to do with it and reproduce it. I mean, the best way to protect it is to just make sure, because it's going to happen, is to just make sure that, you don't lose any rights to your original content, and that when something's taken out of context or someone misquotes something or whatever, that you have the opportunity to show the full and correct version of what it is they're taking out of context. So you want to make sure that you maintain all of your, your video, your audio, whatever. And then that way, when something happens, you have the ability to be like, no, he said this plus this and this. And then you have the ability to kind of rebut what's going on there. So, it's just due diligence, making sure that you're familiar with like how people quote you or how people use things that you created, and just want to make sure that you can correct, quote unquote, the record or whatever it is that you need to do. So it's just diligence and making sure that you have the material ready to refute it, because it's going to happen no matter how hard you try to control it. But, you want to kind of try to refute it as much as possible.
Cool. Let's dig into a little bit on how to handle legal disputes. Everybody's been in a legal dispute, and people really do make it a personal thing. Most of the time, it is a personal thing. What's the biggest mistake that you've seen in the first 24 hours with people dealing with a massive legal dispute?
Sure. So I would say you're talking about like when they're actually like you're served with a lawsuit. Here's your lawsuit. Okay.
Yeah.
I would say the biggest thing is they ignore it and put it on the back burner and think it's either going to go away or it's something that doesn't require immediate attention. So I would say that's probably the biggest issue, is that people, a large percentage of people don't take it seriously and don't timely, or I should say timely, take it seriously. Like they'll wait until the period to respond to the lawsuit is almost over, and they'll be like, "Oh, I guess I got to deal with this," or something like that, versus dealing with it the moment that they're served, because it's only going to get worse and bigger as time goes on. So putting it to the side or not thinking about it is not a smart decision and is not the right remedy. And then also another thing too is that, if it's a business related lawsuit or something related to whatever, you just pointed out that a lot of people take it personally or whatever, but it's not, you shouldn't take it personally as much as possible, and as try to compartmentalize it, because for someone that was a business decision to sue you, it's not like a personal thing. It's like you violated a copyright law, so you're sued, or you violated or you breached a contract, or you owe someone money or something like that. It's not like a personal decision, like I'm out to get John. It's like, I was in a business relationship with John, and now John owes me money, so I need to go get my money. Not because I hate John, but because I was in a relationship with him governed by a contract that says now he owes me money. So a lot of people can't wrap their minds around that and just get obsessed with the personal aspect of it for a business lawsuit, and they need to compartmentalize it and understand that when you're in business, at some point you're going to get into a situation where a lawsuit may arise and you need to deal with it properly.
That's a hard thing, because it does. People do. I can speak for myself. People do make it personal. Like it's like, why are you coming after me? Like, what did I do? I didn't do anything to you. It's like, well, okay, you breached this contract, and that's basically what it is.
Yeah.
How does litigation really work behind the scene?
Well, litigation is, I don't know, it's a process, but it's also like there's an art to it, even though it should be like an objective process. There's a certain subjective aspect to it. There's, like I said, an art to it. There's a certain panache that you have to do it. It's not always black and white, even though it should be pursuant to the law. There's gray areas. So litigation is like a ebb and flow of a process that is supposed to start and end within a certain time period. And during that time period, things happen in order to resolve the litigation, whether it resolves via settlement or rather it resolves via some kind of judicial process, or rather it gets resolved via a bench trial, which is in front of a judge, or a jury trial in front of a jury. So as a client, I try to keep my clients informed in like an objective sense about what's happening. Like, this has been filed, this is what this means, this is the next step that happens, this is how you respond to this. But sometimes it doesn't happen that way, and it's kind of a, like a free-flowing process where you try to predict what happens, but you can't really predict what happens. So it's just a process of a bunch of things that happen that should happen one way, but can happen anyway, and you just have to be ready to deal with it in the way that it happens until it resolves.
Does it differ country excuse me, does it differ country to country? Because like content creators, they're not bound by borders. They're like throughout the entire world.
Yeah, it doesn't just differ country to country, it differs within the country. So, for instance, I'm in Florida in the US, so we're governed by federal laws regarding certain things involving, like intellectual property and stuff like that, but we also have state-specific laws that you may not have in another state, or you may have better laws or different laws in another state in the US. So it depends totally on where you're located, or where the the offended party is located, or whatever. So like in Canada, obviously you have, even though we're all based on English common law, you have a variation of that that's different from what we have in the United States. And within the United States, I have a different version of what one state would have because I'm in a different state. So it totally depends on where you're located, on where if you're the defendant in a lawsuit or whatever, it's where the plaintiff is located too. So it's totally geographic specific, and it's totally subjective depending on where you are.
So if I break a copyright law in United States, but my company's based out of Estonia, for example,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't break any laws in Estonia, does the United States party have the right to sue me, and would they win?
Yes, they have the right to sue you because the internet covers everywhere, so it's not geographically bound. So yes, the US party would have the right to sue you. Would you win or lose? I mean, it depends on the case, but at the same time, you know the court's jurisdiction ends at the state that it's located in. So if you're in Estonia, I can't stop you in Estonia, even though I've won a case in the United States. And I can't take money from you to pay your damages in Estonia because I'm in the US. So I can execute on your assets like in the state in the US that I'm located in, or I can force you not to do something in the state I'm located in the US. But if you're outside that state, even within the US, I can't necessarily stop you, and I can't be made whole by collecting on a judgment or something because of the limitations of my judgment. I can take my judgment and go domesticate it in a foreign jurisdiction and make it a judgment in that jurisdiction, but that's a very time-consuming, complex, and costly process where that differs totally, again, on where you're located as well.
The reason why I ask is because I've seen it. I haven't seen. I've seen a company here in Canada. Let me rephrase that. I saw a company that's existing here in Canada, and it's a major company, major Canadian company. And when I was visiting Greece back home, I saw the same style of company with the exact same name.
Mm-hmm.
So if that company, if the owner of the CEO of that company finds out that that name is there with the exact same uh, business model, they would have the right to sue them.
Yes, but is anything going to happen? Are they going to do anything about it in the home country where the defendant is? It's very hard and probably not likely.
Okay. Okay.
So
When
if they were to ever go from Greece to Canada, they'd be in big trouble. But if they just stay in Greece, then it's hard to make things happen with your Canadian judgment.
okay. When is it a good idea to negotiate versus to fight?
It's always good to negotiate, even when you're fighting. So there's never a bad time to negotiate. You can always try to make a deal no matter what situation you're in. You always want to try in good faith to resolve something and make good business decisions. You always want to consistently go over whatever situation you're in and make the best business decision possible. So it's always a good time to negotiate. Sometimes you have to fight. You can always negotiate while you're fighting. I negotiate while I'm fighting all the time. I try never to close that door, but sometimes you got to litigate or you got to fight. You got to fight, but at the same time, never close the door to negotiation.
Cool. I want to talk about an important thing here, especially for content creators. Like I said, like we've said before, content creators have no borders. We can be anywhere in the world doing whatever we want. Problem with that is we also have the option to, if we can, create a corporation outside of the home country that we're living in, which allows us to pay taxes in that country. What's the law is there a law stating that what's the rules behind paying taxes? Basically, what's the rules behind paying taxes? And how would somebody like me, for example, open up a corporation who's based out of Toronto, opens up a corporation in Estonia, which has better tax laws and better regulations when it comes to businesses? What would my tax requirements be?
Sure. So that's truly a subjective question. So that's 100% dependent on the country you're in, the region you're in, the locality you're in, whatever. As an American, I can tell you that no matter where we ply our wares, we have to pay taxes to the US government. So that whole set up a foreign entity, do whatever, yada, 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 doesn't work for us for the most part, because if we're making money, it goes to Uncle Sam. So it doesn't matter if, I'm an American, but I go work in Australia. If I'm making money, it's going back to the United States to pay taxes because I'm earning income somewhere on earth that, as an American, I'm required to pay taxes on. So other countries don't work that way. I know there's a lot of European countries that don't work that way, where what you're talking about is what they do, where they go hide in a tax shelter so they don't have to pay their home country taxes. I know, like Monaco, Switzerland, those are European examples of places where people go, I don't want to say hide out in Europe, but go in Europe to not pay taxes from their home countries. But they have different rules and different laws than the US has, where if you flee the US, you still owe taxes to the US. But in other countries, if you flee the country, then you don't owe taxes. So internationally, a lot of people set up international businesses that are headquartered in another country, or, they come up with, like partnerships or trusts or, crazy stuff that's like bounced off of 3 different countries before it goes back into where it actually is doing business. Like you have like just super obscure places that have like, like the Cook Islands. There's a huge thing with Cook Islands trusts in the South Pacific, and Kiribati and all these other countries that are, I don't want to say obscure, but they're not first that comes to the top of your mind countries when you think of 95 countries in the world, where they're tax havens and people hide out there to not pay taxes from other countries. And so, yeah, you just set it. I mean, you can set it all up online. If you go online, there's, Panama is another one. And there was a huge thing with the Panama Papers like 15 years ago when that whole scandal broke, where it was revealed all these people were trying to hide taxes and stuff. And the same thing with Switzerland when Swiss banks started to have to report income to the U.S. government. So, yeah, you can do it. It's totally country specific. It's totally from within the country specific. So it doesn't apply for Americans. So it's not something like I'm in tune with and doing. But yeah, for other countries, yeah, you can do it.
Yeah, yeah. I lived in Florida for a year.
Yeah.
I had an LLC in the state of Florida.
Yeah.
I haven't renewed it. Is there any? Sorry, it's a little bit personal. I don't know if I should be going into personal stuff.
It's fine. Whatever questions you want.
Is there any repercussions for somebody who moves down to the United States, opens up an LLC, and they leave the U.S.? Is there any repercussions for them to keep paying taxes to the United States?
If you're generating income, yes. If you're not, then probably not.
Okay. So long as you're not generating any income, you don't have to pay.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, if your business is dormant and not doing anything, you're not generating income, so there's no taxes. There's no money to pay taxes on. But if you're still running your company, then yeah, you got to pay your taxes.
Okay. Let's switch gears into IP. I want to really focus in on a little bit of IP, intellectual property, because it's such a sticky point for us. How do you defend your IP?
Sure. So, no matter where you're located, each country has its own IP laws and whatever. But then there's also like WIPO, which is the World Intellectual Property Organization, which is like a central clearinghouse for IP stuff. And then there's ICANN, which is like the World Clearinghouse for domain names and internet stuff. So it's another country-specific thing where you want to protect your intellectual property where you are. So if you create things, you want to copyright it. If you create other things, you want to trademark it. If you create other things, you want to patent them, or you want to use contracts to enforce trade secrets, or you want to use contracts to enforce licensing rights. So the thing to remember with intellectual property, no matter where you are, is due diligence. You want to make sure that you're protecting your content the moment it's created. You just don't let it sit out there and then you get around to it one day and then you find out that someone stole your idea, but you got problems because you never protected it to begin with. So no matter where you're located, you want to make sure that you enforce your intellectual property rights the moment you have intellectual property to enforce.
How long has this been around? Because I came across IP protection laws when I started podcasting, and I never heard of it from before because it doesn't seem like in the 80s or the 90s or early 2000s it was that big of a deal.
Yeah, no, it's been around. It's been around as long as law has been around. It's just been around in different forms. It's just now it's more prevalent because the technology is more prevalent and there's more content out there than ever before, no matter what it is, that can be infringed upon. And that's why it's such a prevalent thing now, because it's way bigger than it used to be.
Yeah, so it's kind of like the second you even think about starting a podcast, you got to start barreling down on your IP stuff too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Long-term risk management. What are some of the things that a podcaster or a content creator can think about for protecting themselves 5-7 years down the road? Because to be honest with you, most podcasts, they don't make it past episode 20.
it's the same thing you do in the short term. I mean, like we said, you protect your intellectual property rights, you make sure you have contracts in place, you make sure that you know your relationships with the people you deal with, and you make sure that they're clearly defined in writing, and you systematically and objectively carry out your business and do everything thoroughly every time, and don't take shortcuts, and don't not use your processes. At some points in time, you always use your processes, and that's the best, is just due diligence and making sure you do everything the best that you can do it.
Cool. Matthew, we're coming up close to the end of the show, and these are 5 questions I ask all my guests. I'm calling them the Rebel 5.
Okay.
If you could get back to your day one of your journey, what would you tell yourself before you started becoming a lawyer?
Before I started becoming a lawyer, before I started my own business?
Let's go with starting with your own business.
All right. My own business would be get smart with all of your media and advertising, and don't fall for all the snake oil stuff out there. I made a lot of mistakes with media, SEO, optimism, just crazy stuff, and wasted a bunch of money. So that would be one thing I would tell myself.
That's good advice. That's definitely good advice, because there is a ton of it. When motivation disappears and you feel that no one's around, what keeps you showing up anyways?
Internal discipline. I mean, no one is as hard on me as I am on myself regarding professional stuff and business stuff. And, I mean, it's all about what you do when no one's around. And when no one's around, I still work as hard as I do when, someone's looking at me or someone's watching me. So it's just internal discipline.
Very cool. What's the one failure that punched you in the face but ended up building your backbone?
I would say one failure that punched me in the face but wound up on my backbone. Luckily, John, I've had setbacks, but I haven't had, luckily, knock on wood, I really haven't had any catastrophic failures in my career. I've had setbacks that I've obviously learned and grown from, but I've never had one incident, luckily, and I guess I'm unique in that's just knocked me on my ass that I didn't know I could get up from. I've had bad situations and setbacks, but I've never had that one knockout thing that's ever hit me, and I guess I'm lucky because of that.
Okay, what was your biggest setback that built your backbone?
It would just be professional setbacks, regarding working when I worked at my 2 large law firms, plateauing and not being able to advance, or coming up against a wall where essentially I've gone as far as I can go, and I'm not going to do any more professionally, and I'm probably not going to, advance further in that organization. So realizing that essentially, I don't want to say wasted my time, but, I put in, a couple of years of whatever development that I'm never going to get back.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's part of why I started my own business, because my quote unquote business development is, I'm the 100% benefactor of that. So I don't have to worry about, someone else somewhere didn't make their numbers, so now I have to pay for, or, anything like that. So that would probably be it.
Was there any indicators that you saw that would trigger something like that in the future from those experiences?
Yeah, if everything goes static and I don't have any more clients coming in and I'm not making any more money and I'm trapped, then yes, those would be indicators of I've got problems.
Okay, cool. How has your idea of success changed, and what does it really mean to you now?
Well, I think my idea of success obviously changed from when I was a kid to when I was in high school, to when I was in college, to when I was in law school, to when I've been an attorney now. obviously having a family and doing that is, the most important thing to me. And luckily, I just celebrated my 20-year anniversary with my wife last
Congrats.
week. Thank you. And, we have I have a 17-year-old son who's going to go to college next year, and I have a 14-year-old daughter. So obviously, and luckily, I still have, both my parents around. So, who actually I'm going to my mom's house for dinner tonight. So shout out to
Nice.
mom. So, that's the most important thing in my life as far as success goes, is making sure that, everything's cool with my family and everything like that. Business wise, success wise, is I'm in a position now, again, luckily, where I can do or not do what I want to do or not do, and not have to take orders from people. And, if I want to sleep on the couch Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, I can. I'm going to run into a lot of problems because I'm not going to make any money, and I'm probably going to get in trouble. But there's no one other than myself telling me what to do or not to do. And I would say that that's successful because I have, thrown off the yoke of oppression, and I'm in charge. So I guess for my definition of success, I'm ultimately in charge of the ship. So that would be how I define success now. Would that have been how I defined success, when I first started my law firm, or when I first started being an attorney, or when I first started college, or when I graduated high school? Probably not. So my definition for success has definitely changed to be synonymous with free will and autonomy.
Cool. If this mic went dead right after this question, what final message would you want every creator to hear?
Just to believe in yourself, because if you don't believe in yourself, then no one else is going to believe in you. And just whatever you do, make sure you do it the best of your ability, and make sure you do it methodically and objectively each time, because you always have to put your best foot forward, because you never know when something's going to happen.
Very cool. Matthew, thank you for bringing clarity to a world most creators avoid until it's too late. Your insight shows that protecting your business isn't about fear, it's about freedom.
No, thank you, John. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. All right, Rebels, remember this. Your voice has power. Every episode you record, every story you tell, every time you hit publish, you're not just making noise. You're making history. Don't wait for permission. Don't play small. The world needs your voice raw, real, and unapologetic. Keep creating, keep pushing boundaries, stay bold, stay sharp, and as always, long live the rebellion.